My rule is that we start on time. And it is now 2 minutes past on time. I'm going to get started. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and keep letting people in as they join. But I've got a brief rundown of what we're doing here today, and then we're going to open it up for conversation. So good morning, everyone. I'm David Englert, Mayor of the Village of Sodus, and welcome to our first virtual forum on Sodus Village Police Reform and Reinvention. Glad you could all be here this morning. I'm going to go over the ground rules. We're going to start on time, and we're going to try to end on time. Please respect each other's opinions, stay on topic, provide specific examples when you can, be respectful of people's time, and speak for yourself. So what we have here, we are dealing with Executive Order 203 from the governor. And it says that the mayor of Sodus must convene these meetings, and we have to examine our police procedures and practices in order to make sure that all people are treated equally under the law. The plan that we draft in the next few months has to be taken to the Sodus Board of Trustees for adoption and submitted to Albany no later than April 1st of next year. And these are the topics that the plan must address, specifically use of force, crowd management, community policing, et cetera, et cetera. So there's quite a few things that we have to look at and make sure that our policies and procedures are addressing them. And we're going to do that by speaking with the community. And the people that are affected by this are the people that need to take part in this. Members of the community especially, and especially those in areas with high numbers of police and community interactions. So the people that deal with the police the most are the ones that we most want to hear from. And we need to include, obviously, members of our local police department, the Office of the Public Defender, Office of the District Attorney, and Office of the County Sheriff. And members of all of those groups are on our task force that we have assembled, who are doing the heavy lifting on this project. So our first effort is for community outreach, and we need to talk to as many people as we can. And we are communicating currently with people, explaining this process to them and trying to get them involved through word of mouth, on the village webpage, the village Facebook page. We are collecting information through online and paper surveys. The survey is available online on the village website, which is www.villageofsodus.org. And if you go under the police department page, you will find it there. Otherwise, if you don't have computer access or you know people that don't have internet access, you could see a task force member for the surveys, or you could come to the village office and get as many as you would like. We are holding 2 virtual community forums. There's this one today and then one on Thursday evening from 7 to 9. So if you know people that wanted to come today but couldn't, please let them know that Thursday evening is also an option. The Zoom link for that meeting will be available on our website and Facebook page as soon as it is generated later today. We were going to hold neighborhood focus groups, but due to the current COVID restrictions, we probably won't be able to do that. But there will be some informal interviews with members of the task force reaching out to specific individuals and groups. So what we're looking at here is in October, we presented this task to the Board of Trustees to let them know it was beginning and to expect to hear from us again. We convened a task force. I invited a few dozen community members and, like I said, members from the county, the Public Defender's Office, the DA's office, the Sheriff's office, to start this work. Last month, we talked about and launched our community outreach, which was in the form of the survey. And a subcommittee started looking at our current policies and procedures. This month, we are going to complete our initial outreach, which is by holding the virtual forums today and Thursday, and collecting the data from the surveys, which will be live until December 16th. Once that is all received, we will sort and prioritize the data that we received, and we will use that information to further look at and modify our current policies and procedures. And of course, that will be done in accord with the Sheriff's Office. Next month, the task force will put all that information together and we'll draft the reinvention plan for community review and feedback. And then we will have more forums, perhaps in person by then, perhaps not, perhaps it'll still be virtual. And we will get public feedback. And in February, we will take that feedback and finalize the plans. And hopefully in late February, early March, I will present this plan to the Village Board of Trustees at a meeting and have them accept it. And we will submit our plans to New York State by April 1st. So in this process, there are specific people and organizations with specific roles and responsibilities. It is my responsibility to develop and present the plan to the Board of Trustees and then turn it into the government, New York State. The Sheriff's Department has to make sure that everything that we do works with everything that they do, and take a good hard look at it to make sure that we are not proposing anything that runs counter to the law. The task force members have a responsibility. They are doing the heavy lifting on this project. They're helping to get the word out, to collect data, to write the plan, and move this whole thing forward. And the general public, of course, has a responsibility to voice their opinions. As always, government only works best for the people when the people's voices get heard. So there are additional resources. If you feel the need to read extensively, there's a resource guide for public officials and citizens, and there is a book on what this is all about available at these websites. These websites are also, I just added them this morning to the village's website. So if you go to the police page on our village website, which again is villageofsodus.org, and if you scroll down past the survey, you will find these links. So you can read more at your convenience. And if you have any questions or concerns or comments about this process, please feel free to reach out to me. Send me an email, but put police reform in the subject line so I'm sure to notice it and get to it. So with that, I'm going to put the ground rules back up, and I would ask anyone who wants to speak to please either raise their hand or use Zoom to raise their hand. And I will recognize you and you can start speaking. Okay. Scott.
I learned to unmute here. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
First off, I want to thank you all for taking this seriously, having these forums and reaching out to the public. I'm a little bit concerned that more of the public did not attend today right now. So obviously I'm not from Sodus, but I have a concern with Sodus. I think you know, as just a general county member, and I'm looking at Sodus as the starting point for a lot of these forums for other areas, such as the Village of Palmyra or Town of Macedon, Village of Clyde, and seeing exactly how you conduct yourselves and make sure it is being taken seriously and genuinely, with the idea, the goal of building a better community, a more trusting community that includes trust with the public and the law enforcement individuals around us. I think that there are people that have not been willing to speak up on problems that they've had throughout the county, that this is an opportunity for them to be here and speak up, and I think we should be encouraging them a lot more. So my actual comment is really more on David's speaking about community outreach, and I'm hoping that it is more of an active community outreach than just putting things out on a website or a Facebook page and you know, making actual calls. You know, the task force should really be making calls to community members and community areas. You have local churches, you have groups of students, you have other community groups such as rural migrant ministries, and maybe reaching out to those organizations directly through just a phone call and saying, hey, we need to hear from you, and making sure that they are invited to these events. We'll get a little bit more community engagement, because I really am interested to hear what people have to say on this topic. You know, I don't think that Wayne County is specifically what the police reform at the governor's level was thinking of. You know, we saw a lot of different unrest around the country and in New York State, specifically in urban areas, and I don't think that he was specifically thinking about places like Wayne County, but it did inspire a lot of people to finally speak up and say, hey, look, we've had similar issues with regards to racial bias, with regards to use of force or community policing, and we have an opportunity here to make sure that we are what our community wants and how our community can move forward. So I'm hoping essentially that you are going to be a lot more active, especially for your next virtual meeting, to get people here and to get more feedback from the community. But most of all, just thank you for taking this seriously, and thank you for having it.
Thank you, Scott. I couldn't agree more. This is something that I am responsible for getting it going, but the task force are the ones that have to do the outreach, because I don't have time to knock on everybody's door as much as I would love to. And I don't have time to make those phone calls, and I don't have time to make those in-person meetings. But we've got a couple dozen people on the task force who, if they all make a couple phone calls, many hands make light work, and we'll get this done. But yeah, I don't think Wayne County, and specifically the Village of Sodus, was what the governor had in mind when he issued this executive order. But I welcome the opportunity to hear from people in the community, particularly those that traditionally don't provide feedback, because perception is reality. And if people perceive that there is racial bias in our policing, then for them there is racial bias. So we need to find out how they feel and how we can go about allaying those fears. We don't have the power to change the world or to change the state, but we certainly have the ability to make our little corner, our 0.94 square miles, our 1,800 people feel better and have a better quality of life. Yes, Mr. Wood.
Just to Scott's point, We did get a little bit of a late start in the rollout, which is actually ahead of other communities in the county. But so I don't think we should take today's attendance as a marker, but to duly note that in fact we need to double our efforts to make sure that we get more people. As a member of the task force, I was able to pick up the hard copies of the survey, which became available just yesterday morning, and distribute about 35, not to 35 individuals, but to people who are then going to interview and hand out and collect and so on. So I think we've got to start, and we just need to keep on top of it. And there's other members of the task force that I would invite to respond as well about what they're planning to do in that end, that are present.
Yes, and Joe sent me an email yesterday reminding me that I forgot to mention where to return those completed surveys. You can return them once the paper surveys are completed. You can return them to the task force, return them to me, return them to the village hall. Reach out to me and we'll get them done. We'll get them collected. Does anyone else have any input?
Yep. Hi, Mayor Pat Hall.
Hi, Pat.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm just going to piggyback on what Jim said. So thank you, Jim, for getting the surveys, the copies to me. I was running around yesterday and had stopped into the office, but the office was closed, and I kind of reached out to Jim to let him know that, and he was able to pick up copies for me. So I've already reached out to some of my neighbors in regards to today's meeting. Again, got in late yesterday, and we'll move forward with getting the surveys done and dropping them off, but also being able to pick them back up. So I'll be doing some of that outreach here this week and into next week, so that we can get them, so that I can get them all collected. So also, just real quick, I don't know where we're at as far as students. I just so happen to have 3 students with me right now, but I'm dropping them off. But I'm just curious as to where we're at with that piece as far as the high school students as well.
That's a good question. We will reach out to our task force members at the school to find out. As far as the online survey results go, we've got somewhere between 30 and 35 responses. Most of the respondents have been people over the age of 50, although I did get one yesterday from a 17 to 24-year-old. So we're getting, slowly we're getting there.
Right.
And again, you don't have to be a registered voter or a property owner to answer this survey. If you have interactions with the Village of Sodus, if you shop here, if you work here, if you live here, if you pass through here, we want to hear from you. Doesn't matter what your age is. So.
Okay. And I just wanted to add real quick, I think it was Scott that mentioned, I don't know, or it might have been someone else. My other thing is, this may be Wayne County, and although I guess the governor or whoever, may not be looking at Wayne County because we're rural. But at the same time, I think I was talking to my own children about the things I don't want to, or they don't want to see happening, as we've seen here over the past 4 or 5 months. So yeah, although we may be, small, definitely what we've been seeing on TV, we don't want that here. So the other part of it is, I guess that's how I see it, is that I don't want to see what we've been seeing on television. So although we're small and the governor may not be specifically, looking at Wayne County, we definitely know that our youth, young people, have heard and or seen what's been happening around the country. And so, yeah, we have to make sure that all voices are heard. And so I've been speaking to a lot of the youth about what we are doing, not only as a task force, but also today. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I completely agree. Even though we are small, and even though we are rural, and even though we haven't had any major incidents, we need to hear from people to make sure that they aren't happening, even in a minor way. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that anybody feels that they are being racially targeted. And that's what we're here to confirm or deny or make sure it's not going to happen. Chief Ryan.
So just to talk about what Mr. Wood was talking about, I carry the surveys in the car, and probably yesterday I handed out probably 10 or 12 of them.
Oh,
I was
great.
sitting at CVS, and I swing down to Patton's. I sat there, and when people would come up to talk to me, I'd just ask them if they heard about the survey. A lot of people said no. Some of them said yes, but they weren't able to get the paperwork. So I've been printing out copies. I keep them in the car, and like I say, I handed out probably 10 or 12 of them. And I told them to, if they had the opportunity, just to drop them back off at the village office.
Yes.
That way they don't think that I got them in the police car and I'm reviewing them and throwing out the good ones, or throwing out the bad ones and keeping the good ones and stuff like that. So I kind of thought maybe that would be the better way to go, just have them drop them
Absolutely.
off at the village office.
Absolutely. And that just further illustrates Scott's point in that community outreach that I can do, which is on the website and the Facebook page and things, doesn't reach everybody. So that's why the task force, the human interaction, the one-on-one contact is what we need to get as many people in this community talking to us and talking to each other as possible.
I think the good thing about it, the more we hand out, the more people are going to know about it, and they'll
Yes.
word of mouth will pass on, and hopefully it'll work out great.
Yes, the interpersonal networks are the most important way to get information around. Scott.
Yeah, just kind of curiosity. Have you got a minimum measurement for how many surveys you want back, what kind of response rate you want back before you say that you definitely got enough people to even give feedback? Because I would also be worried that if you only got, like, say, 30 responses back, that really isn't enough to speak for the entire community, and you probably should have extend the period of time to get the survey or community response back. Obviously you're under a deadline, so you can't extend it forever. But have you got some kind of minimum metric that you're trying to meet?
No. Okay. Being pure and simple, no. We have 1,875 people in the village, but we're not limiting the response rate to the village, so we don't know how many people from outside the village are going to respond. But I agree that 35 responses is not enough. Hopefully that will improve dramatically before the 16th, when we're going to cut off because a deadline is a deadline, and it helps people get their responses in. So hopefully if they hear that they've only got until December 16th to respond, they will respond by the 16th, and that will drive our numbers up. But if it doesn't, the work of the task force is going to continue through February, and we're going to have another round of community forums. And if we have to make changes after the initial draft, we make changes after the draft. But we are under a tight deadline, because if we don't submit this to the state on time, we jeopardize all of our state funding, and the state will likely impose rules and regulations on us that we may not want or need. So that it is imperative that we meet the April 1st deadline. But thank you.
Hi, Mayor. I don't see the icon to raise your hand here, so I'm just going to speak up.
All right, Joe.
So we've been talking about there not being a problem with racial bias in Wayne County. As I've been thinking about again, happenings around our country with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and how they, and also in Rochester with Daniel Prude, and how they impact our county. I initially had the same feeling that, you know, we don't have much of a problem here in Wayne County with that I've heard of with police brutality and with racial profiling. I think in Sodus, that is in the village of Sodus, I think that's true as well. That we benefit from that community policing portion with having village police. I've always appreciated that interaction, and it's always been a more positive interaction than I've had with the sheriffs or with the state police. That being said, my interactions with the sheriffs and the state police has not been completely negative. My point being that just with that community policing, there's a little bit more certainty. I think that people have a little more trust that people have with their community police. One big thing with that I've heard that it's been very alarming to me, and some of the county listening sessions has pointed to, even though it feels like we don't have a problem, we absolutely have a problem with racial bias in Wayne County. Just to put out some of the statistics that a lot of you that have gone to the Wayne County listening sessions have heard me say, these statistics come from the public defender in Wayne County, who got these numbers from the 2018 New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. So in Wayne County, if you are charged with a felony, a white person has a 9.9% chance of going to prison. If you are a black person in Wayne County charged with a felony, you have a 17.6 chance of going to prison. These are numbers broken down by race. You have twice the chance of going to prison for a felony charge in Wayne County as a black person. That's a racial bias in our judicial system, but there also may be maybe actions that happen at the police level that bring more attention to, and maybe over policing of people of color in Wayne County. If you were convicted of a felony in Wayne County and you were white, you had a 22.8% chance of getting probation. If you were black, you had a 6.3% chance of getting probation. You had nearly a quarter of the chance of a white person to get probation if you were black. If you were convicted of a violent felony and you were white, you had 19.1% chance of going to prison. If you were black, 34.3% chance of going to prison. If you were convicted of a violent felony and you were white, you had a 23.4% chance of getting probation. If you were black, you had a 5.7% chance of getting probation. White people in the county are receiving probation for a violent felony 4 times more often than black people in our county. So what this says to me is that we that to me is the definition of systemic racism. And that is absolutely what this executive order is pointed as targeting. So I think in our county, we've in our town, we've had the luxury of having that community policing. I think we've the police that I've interacted with, I haven't gotten a whole lot of bias against my friends, family that I've heard of. I think there are instances where people are maybe being searched or receiving a little more attention. The interaction with police is going further, going beyond, beyond what it would for a white person. A person of color interacting with the police is going beyond what it would be with interacting with a white person. The public defender also mentioned that while these statistics are talking about the judicial system, that the judicial system, the analogy being a sort of the slaughterhouse for marginalized people in the county. The person opening the door are the police and pushing them into that system. Now again, I don't say this to sound like I have a problem with the police. Of course I don't. Like I said, I've had positive interactions. I have my cousin is a state trooper, longtime investigator. My brother is also a I call him the only black police officer in Des Moines, Iowa. I come from a mixed family of 5, and I'm the youngest brother of 3 of my brothers, and 2 of my brothers and my sister are also black. So this is a movement that's close to my heart. I think, like as people have said, I think that we haven't had much of a problem with explicit racism. The systemic racism is absolutely there that I've been talking about. We've had that luxury of not having, or not really luxury, but we've had we've had a better time of it not having police that were explicitly racist in their interactions. Implicit bias, absolutely, and we need to guard against that. We also need to guard against anyone who is flat out explicitly racist from getting onto the police force. So I think there's work that we can do to ensure that we maintain the positive interactions that we have with the police currently, and to do better as far as the racial bias that's clearly visible in these numbers. Some of the things that we've talked about, or a lot of people have talked about in some of these listening sessions, is first measuring, getting a measurable numbers on these interactions. So maybe something starting out with, what was the interaction? What was the initial stop for? What was the outcome of the stop? What was the nature of the interaction? Was there an arrest? And then break down those numbers by demographic information, being one possible measure, so that we can break down, okay, is there a bias that's happening in the police interactions or not? Something we have to generate measurable data on, broken down by demographics. And this is not something, I mean, this is something that I've mentioned before, but and working on this more and more with the task force. I've seen this idea also presented in the 21st century task force report on 21st century policing. That was a large task force put together back about five years ago. So the 21st century task force on policing.
You talking about the national level, Joe?
Yeah, that was national level. That was a report put out with many disciplines involved at the national level. That was a report put out during the Obama administration. The co-chair on that task force was the chief of Philadelphia Police. There was plenty of police representation on that task force. There's lots of good ideas there for removing bias from our system, our policing system here. As far as what we've been talking about with making sure that we get enough input from the community, absolutely. I agree with everyone's points that have spoke up to now. For this to be meaningful, and we've all said that we want this process to be meaningful. We want the community to have trust in the police, and vice versa. We need this to have a strong community. To do that, we have to reach out and get more participation. We have to reach out and hear from more people. And I think some of the Mayor Engler, you pointed to the task force to do that. Like you said, they're also doing a lot of the heavy lifting with a lot of the studies and in meetings and policy work. So we're trying. I think we have to we have to get more people involved. We have to get more people involved, and we have to get more active in putting the survey out, and also really getting word out to effectively to a lot of people to attend these listening sessions.
Well, unfortunately, that's an uphill climb, because our minority communities have historically been marginalized and been ignored, and been unheard. So it's kind of hard to convince people that we legitimately want to hear from them, and that we are legitimately going to listen to them, at the same time that we're trying to solicit their input.
Right. So those personal interactions, those direct interactions, I think that's where we've got the most feedback from people. Yes. So if we can kind of grow the amount of people, or grow the group of people that are reaching out directly to their friends, family in Sodus, I think that would be a great way of getting that interaction.
Absolutely.
Without that, we're endangering this process of not including everyone that should, and not being as meaningful as we need it to be.
Right. So. Well, I have to say, when this first came to my attention, I resented it mightily. I felt felt the governor was being heavy-handed. There's no possible way that we have a problem with racism in our law enforcement. But the longer this goes, and the more I talk to people, the more I see that I'm 100% convinced that Chief Ryan and that Officer Anderson are not racist. However, everyone has implicit bias. So maybe there's some bias in our police force. I don't know. Maybe there's some bias in the sheriff's department, but with the numbers that you've shared, obviously there's some bias somewhere in the system, if not throughout the entire system. We're going to the finished product here is going to be a plan for improving our police operations. And half of that is our policies and procedures, but you're not going to fix bias in our policies and procedures. Certainly can improve them. And if not for this executive order, I don't know when or if we ever would have gotten around to this. It is an extremely real and extremely serious issue nationally, statewide, locally. We have to take a look at it and we have to fix it. And I think what I hear from so far from the surveys, even though it's not a good sample size, is that the community policing is really valuable, really well respected, really appreciated. So I think and I don't want to steer the task force's work, but I think part of it is we need to bring our policies up to date. And at the same time, we need to figure out how to, with our limited budget, how to get more community policing and less law enforcement, if that makes sense. At a time when the county apparently just passed their budget this week, that is reducing manpower at DSS and at mental health. And that's rather unfortunate.
Right. And this all has a huge economic impact to our county as well. And the number of people in the jail, also that's another racial disparity, pretty large racial disparity, is that the percentage of people in the general population in the jail is roughly twice that of the general population of people of color. I think Black people most specifically in the general population. So general population, I believe, I'm not sure on the number exactly, but the numbers I've seen have been at least double that in the jail. So I think that we need to keep the community policing, keep that solid base. But like we said, we can't really fix something unless we have some sort of measure of it. And there's no. We've all heard stories of Black people feeling that interactions have been escalated when it starts with a simple stop and then ends in an arrest. Okay, well, I think one thing that we can do here is we can generate some sort of information to kind of get an understanding of is there an over policing of Black people in this county happening or not, or what is the source of that racial disparity in the judicial system that starts with those people being entered into the judicial system through the police. So what is that? What's happening there? What's the root cause for this? So,
Under Sheriff, you've raised your hand.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that everybody at this point has raised some very good points, very well spoken and respectful of the forum, and I'm happy to see that. And just a little bit to Joe's point, and I'm just going to throw these out. These are the 2019 numbers for incarceration in Wayne County Jail, and they pretty much mirror for what I've seen so far going on in 2020. In 2019, 802 white people were incarcerated at the Wayne County Jail. 228 were Black, 2 were Asian, and 8 were other. So the numbers that the public defender, Andy Correa, put out there are absolutely true and do show some biases. However, we react for calls for service. Outside of V&T, which most of that is self-initiated, we're very responsive. And in the smaller your department, like the Village, with a very limited manpower. And I'll let the chief speak to this, but in many circumstances, they're chasing calls for service and don't have a lot of other time to do the things like you said, Mayor, community outreach and those things that even as us at the sheriff's office would love to do more of. But we're so busy chasing calls for service that a lot of times we don't have the manpower to do that. And so those are the numbers. I just wanted to put those out that are in the jail. And finally, I do agree that, you know, the closer at home, like your village PD, the more intimate the relationship is going to be with your people. That's why here at the sheriff's office, when we started the SRO program, we try, if at all possible, to put somebody from your community into that school. And we have done that at the Sodus Central School District as much as we possibly can. So those are my comments. I mean, I think that we all have biases. I think that one of the best things that are going to come out of here is the increase awareness and increase in training to reduce those biases, for us to all recognize our biases, and so that we can effectively deal with them. And I think that's one of the best things that are going to come out of this whole forums and the whole Executive Order 203. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, back to you.
Yeah, just a couple things. First, I like that people are understanding that this is not a personal attack on any of the officers that we've got going on here, that we're looking at systemic reasons that we might be seeing the evidence of bias that we're seeing. Because like Joe, I don't think that I've really come into contact with any law enforcement officials in Wayne County, and certainly not in Sodus, that I would say, okay, that guy's a racist, right? But we are looking at, you know, what is in the system that disproportionately affects people of color rather than white people. What is leading us to have those statistics? And I think those are important questions that we need to answer. At the same time, you know, we're talking about, you know, to David's point, where it's hard to get people who have been disenfranchised to speak up, to trust you, to understand that we are actually genuinely trying to do work that brings us all together. But I will also point that, you know, in Sodus, you had a very large, for Sodus, rally and march in support of Black Lives, and you had a lot of people speak there. And right then and there are things that you need to be listening to, and maybe reaching out to communities and saying, hey, we've heard this and we want to hear more. You know, and try to establish that trust a little more. This entire effort, you know, deadlines notwithstanding, is going to be a long process. So you're going to have a plan put in place in April, and that's your starting point. And I think the community also needs to understand that's a starting point. It's not an end point. You know, and that's going to help you build trust within the community. That, you know, it's very important that we are really reaching out at every moment in time, that whoever we're meeting with, that we are trying to elicit their opinions and say, look, your voice matters here. And my last point on that is to the sheriffs. You know, you don't have a lot of time to just go out and be out to the community necessarily and say, hey, I'm here to listen to you. But every call that you go on is community interaction. I think most of the officers appreciate that and know that they are responding to a call, certainly, but they are also representing the department and engaging in some community interaction that they still, at that point, have to establish trust. I think that all has to go, you know, there's a lot of things that will go into this plan, but I think, you know, really that attitude of, we don't necessarily always have time. You have time in every single call that you are building trust, that you are doing that community interaction. And it's important to have that in mind as well.
Yeah, Joe, The point that I was speaking to was above and beyond those, but you're absolutely right. Every interaction, every call for service is a chance to interact and treat people fair and equal regardless of the situation. And I totally agree with you that, but when I made that comment, I meant above and beyond that. I mean, this morning we had Shop with a Cop with the families and of some children in Wayne County. Those are the things that are positive interactions that are above and beyond. You know, we don't want people to see us just at their time of need. You know, we would love to see people even outside of that time of need, to be able to have time to communicate as a deputy out in the community and not so much in a forum. That everyday contact, that was more what I was talking about than those calls for service, but you're absolutely right.
Jim?
Many of you know that I spent a long career as an educator in Wayne County and a shorter period in Monroe County. And what we've come to learn in the education, some of us in the education institution, schooling institution, is that some issues are bigger than us. And disproportionality and in racial outcomes are in every single institution in our society. If we've been doing any reading and any listening, those are the issues that we're grappling with. And so policing is just one of the many institutions. And so we see it in education with a disproportionate opportunity outcomes for students from the African-American community, for students from the Latinx community, from the indigenous community. And what we've learned, I think, is that we can develop every interaction to be as in great a quality as possible and still have those outcomes. And so I think that speaks to the institution of public safety. We just don't know why exactly and how to go about disrupting this disproportionate outcome for people of color in any of our institutions. We're getting closer. And part of the problem is we haven't had a sustained conversation over many, many years specific to each of the institutions. I've been teaching a course now for the last 13 years about this information, and in the last 3 years with teachers in Wayne County on anti-racism methodologies in education, in curriculum. And we now know much more about the long-standing case of how people of color have been treated in our country, and that we haven't taught or concluded in our curriculum. So I think we're at a point in our development as a nation and as a region, as a state, to use that information to help us really drill down to figure out all of the ways in which we have this institutional racism that ends up with bad outcomes for communities of color. So I agree with Scott, and I agree with the undersheriff. This is a starting point. We're gonna make the deadline of April 1st in Sodus, and hopefully in the county, with a report. But that report just gets us started on how we go about addressing what we all agree is a problem when we can see it in the data. So I guess this monologue of mine without specific data is to try to make sure that everybody here today is willing to commit to that long-term process. And I don't think that the officers that are in charge of public safety can do it themselves in its entirety. Yes, we need to make sure that every interaction with the community is as free of bias as possible. And we need to extend community policing as far as we possibly can. But I think the problem is even bigger than that. We need that to be happening through the years, but somehow we've got to figure out the human capital, how to marshal the human capital and the resources to study this and to adopt all the study that's already been done. For example, as Joe talks about the task force for 21st century policing at the Obama administration, there's many other research pieces that can be used, but you can't expect online officers to do that work because they're already working to keep us safe.
Well said, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, this is, like I said, we are not going to fix the world. We can make our corner of it a little better, but as you say, the plan, submitting the plan by the deadline is not the end of this process. This is a process of making quality of life better for everyone in our community, and worse for no one, I might add. Yeah, the police, our police department, the sheriff's department is not going to fix everything. This is a societal problem and we need society to step up, but this is a good starting point to educate people. Just as I've learned in this process, I thought I was pretty race neutral coming into this, but every day I learn more and more about things that that I do without even thinking about, that exclude others. And we do the best we can with what we know, and when we know better, we do better. And it's a long process.
In regards to our outreach, I think in addition to just contacting people and getting participation, I think there's also a piece of education on this process that is also kind of hindering participation, because most of us know what Executive Order 203 is, but they're on the task force, but in the community, the process or knowledge of the process that's going on, I mean, we can't expect the public to know exactly what that process is and what the importance and how of it is and how it impacts our community. So I think helping people see the importance of this and how it's going to impact our community is going to be a big part of it. So when I look at participation versus participation at the Sodus Black Lives Matters rally is huge difference. We had a pretty large turnout. It was a great sight to see, a lot of our friends and family from the community marching down the street. So I think if they had knowledge of this process, we'd see a much bigger portion of that whole march participating more in this.
I would like to just do a call out to Tom. I am actually impressed that you've got the paper surveys in your car already, since they only became available yesterday, and you've handed out 10 or 12. I think that's the way, at least locally, where we start to get the word out. And hopefully we can do that at the county level at some point too. But that's just that's a nice added bonus. So thank you.
Well, like I said, at CVS and down at Patton's, I do a lot of walking around, and a lot of people come up to the car and talk to me. And I just ask them if they know about the survey. Some say yes, some say no. I give it to them. If they don't know about it, I give them a brief history on it and give them the survey. And for the most part, they're all happy to get it. And they say they're going to let other people know about it. So, and like I said earlier, I tell them, don't bring it back to me. Just take it over to the village office and drop it off. And that way they don't have to worry about putting something bad in there that I was going to look at or something like that. They don't have to worry about me keeping the good ones, throwing the bad ones out. And I think it works out a whole lot better that way. My opinion.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I would echo that as well. Jim's point. Thank you very much, Tom, for going above and beyond and getting those surveys in people's hands.
Well, like I told the mayor, I think it was a couple of days ago, him and I were talking. Just, I mean, if we're doing something wrong, I'd rather have the people tell us so we can fix the problem instead of just keep doing it wrong and people hating us. Just if we're doing something wrong, we can fix it. Then we're going to have a better community, and they're going to like the police officers a whole lot better. And I just think it's if we're doing something wrong, tell us about it and let's fix it and try to go from there.
So it's Pat. Hi. I just wanted to add to that. I also have them in my car only because I generally see the people who I've spoken with at various stores or in the community, or like I said, I've spoken to some of my neighbors. I think the other piece to that is I carry around a manila envelope when I used to do some other outreach when we worked, I think, with Newark, Wayne, on some surveys. I basically had them kind of put them in an envelope so that one, I'm not looking to see who wrote what, but most people, I think, in my opinion, kind of trust, like, me, I want to say, because I've been out in the community, they kind of know who I am, what I do, and I wear so many hats that it's really not about them wanting to put down what I want them to put down, whether it be good or bad, but just that, as a community person, I'm out here trying to get, like you said, I'm trying to get information from them. And it sounds like, most people are not aware that we even have these surveys. So I'm going to do the best that I can. With that said, I also, again, want to go back to, we already talked about the students, and that's going to be really key to get that. But I do have a question, Mayor. If it's a household where there are more than, there's more than one, or maybe let's say there's some students, a couple adults in there, are we doing those, or should we be doing those as individual as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless they all have the same opinion and exact same answers.
Okay. All right. I was thinking about that the other day because there's one particular household that has several people, several adults are there. And I just was like, wait, I think it's going to be important to get everyone's opinion on, or everyone to fill that survey out. So, okay, good.
Absolutely. We printed about 240 surveys. If we need to print more, we will.
Okay.
Don't worry about that.
Thank.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I just have one other thing.
Yes, sir.
And this is just an observation. I think that there's a big difference between Pat Hall handing her the surveys that she has out versus Tom Ryan, because they have their perception of the community is totally different. So that's a good point that Pat's identified. The other thing is, since we're towards the end of our conversation, it sounds like this is to the undersheriff. It's probably a lot more difficult for your officers to be handing county surveys, similar county surveys, out to the community because they don't have the same community policing sort of function, but I'm curious about, since the county is lagging behind, and yet even in Sodus, the Village of Sodus, a lot of the calls that emanate from the Village of Sodus are answered by the state police or the county sheriff's office. To what extent can we expect the sheriff's department to help in outreach in the fashion that Tom Ryan's doing in Sodus?
Well, first I gotta find out if we're actually doing a paper survey at this time, if there is a thought process in getting that done. I think the biggest thing that I have seen since these have started is the fear of retaliation by our community members, especially of color, to be able to fill these out and get them in. And that even goes on filing complaints. I think that we need to come up with a system in which people can, in which it sounds like the village has done, and at the county level, we need to do the same thing. In order to get these people to respond and respond appropriately and honestly, that they need to be able to do that in a way that they don't have that fear of retaliation. But I will certainly, when the sheriff gets back, emphasize that point, and that we really should be looking to do this.
Thank you.
Am I there? Are you here?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, last chance to add anything to the conversation. Otherwise, we'll be ending a little early.
Shoot.
I think just to respond to the undersheriff. Yeah, thank you for taking the initiative, and your department taking the initiative to put out those surveys. Just kind of brainstorming here. I wonder if
I apologize, everyone. This is the undersheriff. I got something happened to my phone, so I don't know if you heard my comment or not.
Yes.
Yep, we did.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, so we and Sodus, we have the survey is online, so that would, I think that might help alleviate some, or give an opportunity to alleviate some people's fear of retaliation if the county survey was also put online. I think maybe we could, maybe we could put our heads together to kind of transmit some of the work that we've done in Sodus over to the county level survey, and to kind of help both of our efforts get this out.
I will definitely pass that information on.
And just to put anyone's mind at ease, I am receiving the responses to the survey, and I do not know who is submitting the response unless they indicate in their responses who they are. I don't know. I say it's anonymous. It is completely 100% anonymous. I mean, unless you provide me with your email address to get back to you, in which case then it's no longer anonymous, or you tell me who you are in your response. I don't know who you are. So I do guarantee it that it is completely anonymous. And all we want is the truth. We want to hear people's truths. We don't want to hear what they think we want to hear. We don't want to hear what we want to hear. We want to hear the truth. And that's what's important. A couple people have joined us during the forum here. Does anyone new have anything they would like to add or say? Anyone that we haven't heard from have anything to say? And I think we've had a good start. like I said, I will put the link for Thursday night's meeting online today. Please feel free to share it and talk it up and talk up the efforts that we are doing, get survey results in. We have a lot of work to do. Last chance. Okay. I want to thank you all for
Okay.
your time.
Hi, Dave. Mayor, did you say is the link to the survey going to be on that as well?
Yes.
Oh,
For
just a quick
Thursday's
update.
meeting?
The survey is only available on the webpage under the police department tab. Is that correct? It's not on the
Yes. Okay.
Facebook page. So,
Oh,
so
Okay.
maybe David, I'm just wondering if I'm sort of a computer novice and I go on the webpage looking for the survey
Right.
and I don't see it immediately and I don't see any reference to it anywhere on the webpage, I'm not sure that I would naturally go to the police department
Okay.
to find the survey. So if there's any way we can tip people off that in fact that's what they need to do, that would be really helpful.
Okay. I will make that happen today.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Just
Oh, you're
because to me it makes sense if there's something coming up and we're going to share that if that could be there as well, I think that might help.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Well, I will give you 47 minutes of your day back. And this has been recorded. I will process the video and get it posted so the public can view it anytime they want.